So if we put all this together, what you're going to see, unfortunately, the role that Abram plays in this story, not to negate the fact that God has called him, not to negate the role he's going to play later on, not to negate his righteousness and faith and all that, but to say at this moment in his life, where he's at in his relationship with God, and in this story, he's playing the role of the serpent. In verse 18, when Pharaoh goes, "What have you done to me?" that's very reminiscent of what God said to the serpent. "What have you done?" Or to Adam, "What have you done?" Or to Cain, "What have you done?" Your brother's blood cries out from the ground. Or what Noah told Ham, when Noah realized what Ham did to him. You know, there's this "what have you done" kind of situation that takes place. So this story right here fits perfectly into the template that we see in Genesis 3, which becomes recycled over and over throughout the stories. And then I want to think about how this story foreshadows the Exodus narrative. Okay, so we have the king of Egypt here, Pharaoh. We have Pharaoh taking a bride that technically belongs to someone else. We have great plagues that come on Egypt, whatever those were. And we have God doing these things on behalf of this wife or bride that belongs to Abram, because a wife was taken or a bride was taken. We have someone scheming to use another human for their own benefit, Abram, going, "Sarah, listen to what I'm saying. Let's do this." Abram schemes this whole thing up like Pharaoh does in Exodus when he abuses the Israelites, and he schemes a plan to kind of oppress them and keep them weak and use them for his own labor force. And then we have Abram and Sarah being sent out strongly by Pharaoh at the end, just as we see at the Exodus. And then we have Abram gaining many possessions throughout this event. He ends up coming out and leaving with more than he came in with. And this is all the elements of the Exodus story. The people of Israel are referred to throughout the scriptures as the covenantal bride of Yahweh. They're a symbolic bride and wife to God in that covenant sense. Pharaoh takes the bride that is not his at the Exodus story, uses them for his own benefit. Plagues come on Egypt. Pharaoh eventually drives them out forcefully and angrily after his firstborn dies. And then the Israelites end up plundering Egypt on the way out, so that they leave with more than what they came with. And God brings out his people, considering Abram's history with Egypt and the fact that he has an Egyptian servant, Hagar. It makes a lot of sense why we see Egypt oppressing Israel in the Exodus story, based on their relationship history and where they're at. And then, before we close with verse 20, I want to go back and make a few observations and connections to Genesis chapter 3, okay? So think about the components of the Genesis 3 story. We have a man and his wife. Right here we have Abram, and we have his wife Sarah, just like we see in the Genesis 3 story. The woman here is being told something. Just like in Genesis 3, the serpent creeps up to Eve and goes, "Did God really say?" And here we have a woman that's beautiful in appearance. She's attractive. She's desirable. The Egyptians will take her, right? So in the Genesis 3 narrative, we have the forbidden fruit, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? That fruit is attractive, something to be desired, right? And then we have Eve taking and reaching for that fruit. And then we see here Abram is actually motivated to tell Sarah this and to scheme this up. He's motivated by a fear of what might happen. Or in other words, there's something about what could happen or what might happen that motivates Abram to do what he does here. Same with Eve. The serpent gets her when he says, "You will be like God." So she's motivated by that. When she sees that, oh, I can know good and evil on my own terms, she takes and eats. And then there's this essence of, look, Abram's afraid that they'll kill him, but they'll let Sarah live. So there's life and death. Just like in Genesis 3, God tells Adam and Eve, look, I've given you life. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In that day you'll surely die. So there's a promise of life and this assurance of death if they disobey. And then the Egyptians end up, just like Abram said, if they see you, they're going to want you. Well, when Abram entered, the Egyptians saw the woman was beautiful. Just like Eve sees the fruit is desirable and good to eat and good for food and pleasant to the eyes. And when they saw her, they took her into Pharaoh's house, just as Eve took the fruit. And then what's interesting is there is a consequence for Pharaoh taking what isn't his, and it's called the plagues. But here in this situation, Pharaoh isn't to be viewed as the one who's necessarily in the wrong. It's actually Abram. Because you have in Genesis 3, God calls Adam and goes, what have you done? Calls Eve, like, what did the serpent do to you? Tells the serpent, what have you done? That kind of thing. And here, in the place of God, just narratively, Pharaoh is the one going, what have you done to me, Abram? Right? So there's consequences. There's that same kind of calling to hold someone accountable and to give consequences. And the consequence Pharaoh dispenses is that, well, Abram and Sarah are sent out. They're sent away. They're, in that sense, exiled. And after Adam and Eve eat from the tree, where are they sent? They're sent away from the tree of life in exile. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Jason, and I have some free gifts for you on our website at abovereproachministry.com. Maybe you want to learn how to study the Bible. We have free Bible classes just for you. Are you maybe a newer believer? Go ahead and check out our Christianity 101 Foundations course. Maybe you hate videos. Well, we have a podcast, so you can listen to all of our messages on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Maybe you want to join or start a discussion group. Check out our map of all the current armed discussion groups all around the world. And do you maybe live near Greenville, South Carolina? If you do, you should check out our church on Friday nights. Visit movementchurchsc.com for more information. And if you'd like to partner with us financially, you can snag a copy of my book, Fruitful, or head over to the donate page and donate through debit or credit card, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or even mail a check to P.O. Box 509 Inman, South Carolina. And if you want to make a ministry connection, feel free to reach out to me on our website. All right, I know that was a lot, but I'm done. So let's get back to the video. And then Pharaoh gave orders to his men saying, look, send them away. But I think the men there are not just to play a role in sending them away, but to ensure they also don't come back in. And at the Genesis 3 story, we have God put cherubim with a flaming sword at the entrance to the garden, into the tree of life, at the east, so that Adam and Eve don't go back in. They guard the way back in. And I think the men here that Pharaoh orders are to kind of play that role as well, to ensure they don't come back into Egypt. And then, so if we put all this together, what you're going to see, unfortunately, the role that Abram plays in this story, not to negate the fact that God has called him, not to negate the role he's going to play later on, not to negate his righteousness and faith and all that, but to say at this moment in his life, where he's at in his relationship with God, and in this story, he's playing the role of the serpent. He's the one deceiving his wife, involving his wife to deceive the Egyptians and trick Pharaoh, and there's consequences. Not to say that Abram is definitively this evil guy, but in this moment, he's playing the role of the crafty serpent. Verse 20 says, and Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him. They sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Throughout this story, I just have a question. Where the heck is everyone else? Where's Lot? Where's Lot's wife? Where's the household of Abram? Why does it mention the wife and focus on her and Abram only in this story? And I think because we're getting a picture of who Abram and Sarah are at this point, as God is working with them. There's no record of Sarah disagreeing with Abram's plan to deceive Pharaoh. It doesn't mean she didn't, but we don't have that in the story recorded. We don't have Abram considering what might happen to the Egyptians and concerning himself with what if God might get involved and protect them, if God's called us, like maybe God. Abram doesn't consider any of that. He doesn't consider the consequences for his trickery. He was just concerned with himself. And this does not mean that Abram only ever cares about himself and only ever makes mistakes. But the first story, the first chapter that we get of Abram's life is this story about this covenant patriarch fleeing, not trusting God fully, scheming, using others, preserving himself. And I'm sure he had his wife in mind too, but it just seems to be all about Abram in this story. And as God works with him throughout the story, you'll see that Abram changes a lot. He progresses. He definitely gets sanctified in that sense. He becomes more of a faithful covenant partner to the Lord. But God, this is the application. God works with us where we're at. God is in no rush to change us all at once, or he would. He's patient to progressively develop and sanctify us along the way and even use us with all the flaws we bring to the table. God is sanctifying us progressively in no kind of rush. And this is the love and patience of God, is to know Abram's going to fail and still call him, is to know we're going to make mistakes and still not get it after years and still work with us and use us. So as we close chapter 12, it's ending on a pretty sad note. And yet the promise of God in the middle of this chapter, that I'll multiply you, I'll give you a nation, and at the beginning, that is to be the main focus of this story. Not Abram's failure, not his deception, not him scheming, but the promises of God and the truth and faithfulness of God in the midst of that. Hey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more biblical content just like this. We have hundreds of videos, but you might be most interested in these ones right here. Also, visit our website for all of our free resources and classes. And thank you so much for partnering with us financially to make this ministry even possible. Keep moving towards Jesus, and I'll see you in the next video.